right. Good morning. Thank you so much to the PMA for inviting me to come up here and speak, and to Beth especially for the nudge to get up here and do this. You're going to hear a lot more about who I am and my work experience through my presentation, which is basically a case study of my experiences from evolving from a content monkey. But I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to first ask all of you kind of how you made your way into product marketing. I always think it's fascinating that product marketing draws folks from all sorts of different backgrounds and disciplines. So out of curiosity, by a show of hands, how many of you entered product marketing through maybe a hard science? Maybe you work in tech and so you have an engineering or computer science degree. By a show of hands. Okay, fair number. And then how many of you came into product marketing through more of a writing or communication discipline? Maybe you came from marketing. Maybe like me, you have a journalism degree. Maybe you studied history or philosophy or some degree that involved a lot of writing. More hands are going up. Product marketing is definitely a discipline that attracts storytellers, attracts really strong writers, and attracts really strong communicators. And that can be a great source of strength to start from as a product marketer. We are first and foremost storytellers, but it can also create kind of a holding pattern where you find yourself writing a lot of content and kind of being the de facto content service organization. So like I said, this is a lot about my experience kind of evolving from content monkey into fully self-actualized product marketer, as learned by a lot of the failures and mistakes that I made along the way. All right, a little bit of theory before we get started. I really love everything that Market One puts out. If you're not following their newsletter, subscribe to the newsletter, highly recommend it. It's really geared more towards like early stage marketing organizations, but there's a lot of valuable content, and this is one that I really appreciate, is kind of a simple analogy of thinking about a marketing organization as being kind of two parts, fundamentally. The first is the fuel. All of the information, all the messaging, all the content, all the way through production, everything that really fuels that marketing engine, which is then all the channels and the tools and tactics that you use to kind of get that information into the hands of your buyers. So think performance marketing, demand generation. And that's all well, that's a really helpful analogy here. But when we kind of narrow in on kind of that subset of information, all of that web copy, all of that email content, all of the reports and the blogs, there kind of becomes a question of, in practice, how does all of this work really get done, and who really owns that work, and how do we really divide that line between what product marketing is doing and what content marketing is doing. This was something that I was a little bit clueless to when I first started my career in product marketing. Again, I came from more of a journalist background and kind of just came with some writing skills and not a clue of what product marketing was. And that was okay, because I don't think my first organization really had a good sense of what it was either. So the first company that I joined was Alien Vault. Some of you are familiar with that startup. When I joined, it was kind of Series C, Series D growth stage startup, really strong velocity motion, very inbound focus. And so the marketing engine was really big and really demanding, right? But what we didn't really have was a lot of content marketing maturity. So while Alien Vault had a lot of folks who were really experts in their domain, whether that was SEO, conversion optimization, event marketing, we didn't really have a strong content marketing program. And similarly, our marketing organization, folks were really experts in their programs and their channels, but they weren't necessarily experts in the security technology that we were selling and that we were writing about. Really, the expectation was that product marketing was that organization that brought the product expertise and brought that knowledge and then delivered the content. So my first 2 years as a product marketer, I was a pretty content content monkey, as I like to reflect on. This is really kind of the laundry list of everything that I did for the first 2 years. And it was fun. I was happy. I got to be a writer, and I really got to learn the space. It's a great way to learn the technology that you're selling if you're writing about it on a regular basis. But there were some problems with this model. And the first is that really true marketing costs were never really accounted for. So if your product marketing organization is a content service organization, that kind of equates sometimes to free resources for your marketing organization. Going rate for content writing services or freelancers is like $1 per word maybe. So, if I need a blog and I can either spend $1,500 getting a content writer or I can ask my product marketers to do it, I'm going to go do that. Similarly, that made it really hard for us as a product marketing team to measure performance and really understand the value that we were delivering to the organization. We get to the end of the quarter and, that CMO question, what did you guys do this quarter, looked a lot like, well, we wrote X amount of white papers. We delivered X amount of webcasts. We wrote X amount of blogs. And so measurement and output and performance was really kind of got wrapped into that marketing engine, which was also a little bit dangerous because product marketing sat within the product org, not marketing. And so when you think about kind of lobbying and budgeting and trying to advocate for more resources, that can become a little bit more challenging to have those conversations and negotiate. Overall, I think at Alien Vault in those early years when I first joined, product marketing was really not a strategic business unit. It wasn't really seen as being kind of at that center of go-to-market strategy, kind of liaising with product and sales and marketing, and then finding areas to kind of lean in and really drive. We were, really a service organization. And because of that, the organization really missed out, I think, on some really important value that product marketing could have been delivering. And similarly, as individuals, PMMs on the team, we really missed out on a lot of career development, growth opportunities, and kind of just experience doing other things in product marketing besides writing content. So wanted to rectify this, so what did we do? Well, this is about the time that Richard and the Product Marketing Alliance is getting started, and they're delivering messaging frameworks, and we're talking about the messaging guide, and I'm starting to get hip to that. And so I'm like, okay, cool. We're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to start writing messaging guides, right? I'm going to come down from the mountain before the launch, deliver this 40-page document. It's going to have everything that the marketing team needs in it as a source guide in order to do everything that they need to do to get all this information into the engine. So that worked brilliantly, right? No, it failed terribly. It's kind of that question of, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, similarly, if you write a messaging guide and there's no one there to receive it, there's no one really ready, willing, or able to activate that messaging, what happens? Well, that messaging guide just becomes duplicative work for product marketing. So I'm going to say this. If you are in a stage of your career right now where you are writing messaging guides ahead of your launch and you're the only person consuming those messaging guides to then go write all the blog posts, all the email content, all the web pages, you can just stop writing messaging guides. Just go straight into the content, right? You're really not doing any kind of help or favors for yourself. This took me a long time to kind of figure this out, right? We didn't have someone there. I didn't have a content marketing strategy function who was able to receive that information. And so I would get things like, okay, nice messaging guide, but can you go, turn that into web content for me now? So that was kind of a pretty big lesson learned for me. And what we really needed to do, I think, instead of delivering the messaging guide and trying to shift that process, was really to have a hard conversation with the marketing team and start to renegotiate those expectations and the roles and the boundaries between product marketing and product and marketing. And that really should have been the first conversation that we had because, we failed to define product marketing in that organization, and lo and behold, the marketing team was very happy to say, well, that means product marketing is the content function for us. So if this sounds like something that's familiar, my takeaways from this experience and what eventually helped me down the road was to first and foremost kind of define the product marketing charter. If you're in an organization that has a low understanding of what product marketing is, don't start with the messaging guide. Don't say, look, this is the type of work I could be doing. Start with the charter. Help the business, help your counterparts understand what product marketing can be doing, and ratify it. You're going to need executive and business sponsorship for this. You're going to need kind of an agreement from the organization. This is not just a manifesto that you write and then go back to writing content, right? That can be a really challenging effort, but it probably pays off a little bit more in droves. The second thing then is to really sit down with your counterparts and write that content RASI. This saved my ass many times later on when Alien Vault was acquired, to really understand like step by step who is responsible for what part of this process, what are we signing up for and what are we not signing up for. And then kind of helping your stakeholders understand that like, hey, I'm not going to deliver that end product, but here's what I'm going to deliver for you as part of that RASI. And that's how you can kind of start to shift from delivering content to delivering information that your teams can then use. And then finally, aligning your OKRs to strategic business goals. So instead of aligning your quarterly project to like, we're going to go complete so many launches and write so many blogs, thinking about ways to measure that. So maybe it's user adoption, right? So first 90 days of a new feature launch, we're going to have 40% of our customer base adopt a new feature or use it at least once. So starting to think about ways you can measure product marketing differently. I know that was a hot topic that came up earlier. So we never really figured it out at Alien Vault, but anyway, Alien Vault was acquired by AT&T Cybersecurity. And I don't know if you guys have ever had an experience of being swallowed by a whale. But that's what it kind of felt like. Almost overnight, I went from having 200 coworkers to about 30,000 coworkers at AT&T. And initially, I was really excited. We were developing a new business unit within AT&T Business. We were pulling together all the cybersecurity assets and creating a really large portfolio. I didn't know this going in, but AT&T, just by nature of having a network as a telco, is actually one of the largest MSSPs in the US. So it was kind of like an opportunity to really scale everything out. The things I was excited about was that face value content marketing maturity was just off the charts in terms of the amount of resources and amount of money that AT&T had to put into content production. I mean, if you wanted to develop a holographic interactive trade show experience, you could do that. Right? There was money falling from the sky, it seemed like, in order to develop content. So I thought, oh, this is fantastic. I'm never going to have to write anything again. This is the place where I'm going to be able to take my messaging guide and suddenly disseminate that at scale and have everyone activating it. The other thing that I was really excited about was that every channel, every vertical, every segment at AT&T had its own sales and marketing team. And so if you've ever worked in an enterprise, you know that it is just a universe of individual kind of sales and marketing teams for every segment, which was pretty exciting, but also meant that we went from a very targeted ICP to now selling to everyone with a pulse. And we're not really ready for that, I'll say, when we were acquired. We also were kind of the shiny new object because we were bringing cybersecurity and really creating a new business unit. Overall, I would say that AT&T generally had low domain expertise. So when you think about that small business team from the Northeast region that really focuses on mobility solutions for small customers, they don't have a ton of domain expertise in cybersecurity. And that became pretty tricky. We got really roped into everyone's important initiatives. I would get calls on a regular basis that were like, hi, I'm with a contact call center out of Sacramento, and we need you to come and present to our sales team about how we can sell network security to this segment of the market. And everyone's initiative and every one of those calls were extremely important, and they were all executive-backed, and it was just totally overwhelming when I came in. So I thought, we're going to get buried getting roped into everyone's initiatives here as kind of the team that needs to deliver the message to everyone. So what do? Finally, I'm in a position, I'm going to write that messaging guide, and all of these different teams are going to use it, they're going to consume it, and I'm going to do this whole thing at scale. This is what Richard's talking about. This is awesome. And did that work? Absolutely not. So what I learned eventually was that we had so many different channel marketing teams. There was a channel marketing team for healthcare, for finance, for small business, and they were all experts in their audience and their customer segment, but they didn't know much about cybersecurity. So I couldn't just give them a vanilla messaging guide and say, hey, have fun with this. They really needed kind of that lens or that context in order to kind of connect the dots for their organization. This is really where I learned how to do audience segmentation, was at AT&T, because before at Alien Vault, it was one customer, one ICP, and now it was 30 different flavors of messaging. One of the most important pieces of content that I ever put together at AT&T was an internal guide for sales teams that really just looked at different cybersecurity products within a healthcare environment or within a manufacturing environment, and just really helped the sales teams to visualize, how they could start to have conversations about security with those specific customers. We also learned eventually that not every content request or initiative was worth our time, but usually direct paths to high priority sales teams were absolutely worth our time as a business unit. So my takeaway is kind of that 2 years that I spent at AT&T Cybersecurity then, what I really took away was to kind of think about that enterprise environment as a marketplace, right? You have all of these potential different routes to markets, and you've got resources sitting in every single one of those segments that you can go partner with and you can go activate. But you really need to be choosy about which ones you do, and you really need to think about what are the goals of the business unit. Again, we're just what's the best for AT&T Cybersecurity, and then which of those segments and which of those routes to market align with our go-to-market model, and let's go focus on those, right? So really thinking about that internal marketplace and prioritizing as such, and then learning the diplomatic no also became an important survival skill. So for everything that was really low priority, AT&T is a very polite environment, and so we can say just get lost. So what we did is we did put together kind of vanilla messaging and said, hey, that's fantastic, love the initiative. Here's the messaging. Why don't you take a first stab at it? And I'm happy to review and partner with you once you have that. And it was amazing how many people just kind of disappeared that way. And then suddenly the initiative was no longer important. The other thing that I took a little too long to figure out was the faster that I could adapt to the AT&T way of doing messaging frameworks was going to make my life easier. Just giving folks something that was familiar for them made them feel much better. And it looks something like this. This is not impressive. Like, this is just a standard messaging framework. It was very blue in the AT&T version of this, so I kind of recreated it here. But and I think it was probably inspired by like April Dunford at the time. But it was really just bullet points, right? Like, what are competing alternatives? Who is the customer? How do we differentiate? And then what are those value driver statements? I was shocked at how useful this became for a lot of folks. Sometimes you'd get weird variations of it, and you kind of look at content and go, that's an interesting interpretation. But overall, that really kind of helped us make life easy. So I knew that I didn't want to stay at AT&T forever. I wasn't ready to put on my comfy blue pants and move to Dallas. I had more startups in me. So then I moved into an organization called NS1. Growth stage startup similar to Alien Vault, based out in New York. You probably haven't heard of NS1, but they do DNS. So internet plumbing, but they do it at the scale of like live streaming the Super Bowl and working with Netflix and the likes, so kind of cool if you're an infrastructure nerd. The biggest difference at NS1 was that we had a brilliant, incredible content marketing manager and corporate marketing team, and this was a game changer for me. It was an eye-opening 14 months that I spent at NS1. Because I learned that with a really strong content marketing counterpart, you can start to deliver maybe a webcast that isn't just one webcast, then a blog, then a piece of email content. You can deliver one thing that then gets sliced and diced into 10 different assets. And that is the type of motion that I appreciate so much in content marketing. How can I take one piece of content and really just continue to squeeze water from the stone and get as much leverage and as much mileage as possible? Even now, if you have a content marketing person and you're kind of trying to negotiate workloads and how much you're delivering, I would probably try to create an SLA or an SLO with that team and say, hey, we can do this once a month webcast, but I'd also like to see that turn into a blog post, that turn into a solution brief, that get promoted in such and such ways. I really do believe that can be a make or break relationship with content marketing. Also, corporate marketing and product marketing have this alignment that I'd never experienced before in my life. Before, PR and communications teams were kind of those folks that came at you and they're like, hey, I need slides for an analyst briefing, or hey, I need a blurb about a product in a press release, and then you never heard from them again. But we really had an alignment. To none of my own credit, we had an amazing corporate marketing team, and what that did was really unlock the ability for product marketing and corporate marketing and the executive team to really co-create the strategic narrative of the business. This allowed us to reposition the entire portfolio, rebrand the company, and execute it all within, and launch a few new products all within a few months. So it was pretty magical. The other thing that this really did was, because product marketing no longer had responsibilities as content creators, we were really put into the position of being go-to-market strategists. And this was really the first time in my career that I experienced this, where the COO was coming at us to say, hey guys, what's our second TAM? What are the critical use cases? Who are our audiences that are, most valuable? What should the sales team be focused on next quarter, right? And that really raised the stakes. It was a little bit of like a product marketing boot camp for me. It was awesome. Also raised the pressure. This is probably the biggest growth moment that I had when I realized, when you stop doing content, you get to do all this other stuff, but then, oh shit, I have to learn how to do all this other stuff too. But overall, I would say this was a magical experience. So did I stay there happily ever after? No, of course not. Let's bring it a little bit full circle. I was at NS1 and I got the call that I had been waiting for from the guys from Alien Vault, who wanted me to come on and kind of run product marketing for their new venture. And all I said was, what took you so long? Absolutely. So now I am at a very early stage startup called Nudge Security. We just launched in October. I've been there for, oh, thank you. Take it. And, I might gush a little here because it's a little bit of a dream job for me. But to the credit of the founders, they brought in product marketing as the first hire. And what we did, the founders and me and the board, the funders, sat down and really focused on crafting that strategic narrative. And that was something that I took with me from NS1, was that recognition of I like developing the content, I like developing the stories and the narratives, but I want them to be that aligned, here's what we represent, here's what we stand for, and now here's how that technology supports that, rather than those fractured, weird messaging houses that you end up with where corporate marketing puts it on top and then you're supposed to put products into it. So I knew that I wanted to kind of, be able to kind of start with a blank slate and really work on strategic narrative and develop points of view. So today I'm writing more content than I ever have before, but it's a very different type of content. I'm not pumping and churning out, white papers and demand generation content and, my God, SEO pages. Instead, we're really, my only limitation now is how fast can I craft these points of view? Because it's just so much fun to get to come out there in the market with an opinion and a stance and say this is who we are, why we exist, and why we're different. So it's much more storytelling, much less copywriting. The copywriting, I will say, that was something that was a little bit new to me too, was having a really strong editor, and something that I've learned to appreciate. I don't know how many of you have ever slaved over, finding the right words and the right way to say things in a messaging guide. I'm going to give you permission to stop doing that. Focus on what you want to say and who you want to talk to, and then really let your creative folks do the copywriting, right? Don't spend time on that. You've got people in your organization who are better copywriters than you. I guarantee it. Use them. Invite them to be part of the process as well. This is just how content is shaking out here at Nudge Security. We're kind of a small team of kind of domain experts. So we've got we've got two of us co-running product marketing. We've got someone in content and web, and then we've got growth marketing, and we're having a lot of fun. Let's see, the one thing I want to call out here is you can see that product marketing owns PR and kind of thought leadership content. This is, sort of because I wanted to keep it, because I had so much fun at NS1 doing that type of work. I imagine eventually we'll grow and we'll have brand and corporate marketing and we'll pull this out. But for now, it really made sense for product marketing to keep that as part of the storytelling function, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. We're also doing a lot of first-party research, which is just so much fun to get to pull that information from our product and tell bigger stories with it. Finally, this is just kind of an example of, kind of taking through different stages what content production might look like. Obviously, if you're the first marketer and you're the first hire as a product marketer, which product marketers should always be your first hires, you're pretty much doing everything, right? So back to the first day that I started at Nudge Security, I was, writing the press release for our company, writing the website. But then as you grow, obviously some of that relationship starts to change and can get sent over to content marketing and then also outsourced as well. The one thing, if you are early stage, the faster you can outsource your SEO content and your ad copy, please do. I have no time to write ad copy. That is just a nightmare for me. I hate that. And there are nice agencies who you can bring in to do performance content writing for you. So please, if you're finding yourself in a situation where you're expected to write SEO content, talk to me. We're using some services that are outsourced that I'm really excited about. All right, I'm going to skip this potpourri of parting thoughts. It's just random musing. We can catch up during the happy hour. I want to just open it up for any questions. I know that was kind of a glossy overview of about 10 years of work, so I'm happy to dig into anything.
Yeah, we have is it working? Okay, cool. We have a few. What is ICP? Ideal Customer Profile, right?
Yes.
Cool, cool, cool. Lots of acronyms, but that's one of them.
Yes.
And the rest of them are fun questions. Sorry, that was a fun question, but these are like longer questions. Not acronym specific. I know we have like spreadsheets at work in terms of like what do all these acronyms mean. We're actually like moving away. We're like telling everyone to never ever say an acronym ever again. Say out the whole damn word. Okay. Other questions. I'm not having favorites. What is your favorite piece of content that you've produced at Nudge and why?
Ooh, that is a great question. Oh, easily. So last summer we're in stealth mode, and we brought on a brilliant psychologist from Duke University as an advisor. And so I got to spend the summer working with him and his team to develop academically guided research that looked at individuals' behaviors and emotions as it relates to different cybersecurity experiences they have. So net, when you get blocked by the firewall, when you're trying to get your job done, it says, no, you're not allowed to go to that website, kind of pisses people off, and as such, people look for workarounds. So that really became kind of a seminal part of our story, but it was just so fun to get to work with folks at Duke who are just experts in psychology and kind of bring that into a cybersecurity lens and write that research report. So easily a favorite piece of content, which is available on our website if you guys want to take a look. Obviously.
Start grouping questions into categories. So second one is, can you give examples of content that you've created that has been a proven success, and then how do you measure that success?
Yeah, I don't measure success of content. I also don't measure success of messaging guides. Those are artifacts. What you want to be doing is measuring the success of your messaging, right? How effective is that story working in the marketplace? And those things that can feel a little bit intangible, and ultimately requires collaboration with the engine folks who are actually getting that messaging into the market and then using tools to be able to measure the performance of it. So that is really a collaboration. Again, the outputs of those A/B tests that your web team is running is a good indication of whether your messaging is working. Doing ride-alongs with your sales team and just observing and kind of being the Jane Goodall in the conversation can give you some really qualitative information about how your messaging is landing. But again, to kind of shift away from being a content service organization and a strategic organization, I wouldn't worry about measuring the performance of an individual blog post or content in terms of like how many clicks and downloads and leads did this generate. It's more so kind of on the whole, like how do we look across all that messaging and measure the success of that performance or those messages. So.
Kind of content topic and storytelling. And I saw the AI question. We'll get there. That's a really good one. Again, these are all good questions, but I'm going to save that one towards the end for you, Danielle. Storytelling is difficult to share with content teams. They're not used to it. So how do you make it work? What structure do you use?
Yeah, storytelling with content teams. So if you're in an environment where your content folks are, really resourceful strategists in terms of like, I know what types of content my audience wants and I know how to kind of get it through production and get it on the website, that can be great. Like, I don't want product marketers ever to shy away from storytelling. Like, come show up to the webcast, bring your slides, be the storyteller, but make sure that the teams are able to kind of repackage that and get more mileage out of that. I would say in terms of like how do you get your teams used to kind of using storytelling and used to kind of consuming messaging, this is something I didn't do early on that I wish I had was ask your teams what they can consume. Ask them what kind of style of information they want. Do they want bullet points? Do they want a 40-page guide? My first messaging guide that I wrote, someone said, oh, it's great, but it's really long. I said, are you kidding me? I'm like, okay, I guess I'll write a shorter one next time, right? So really, again, know your audience, your content teams, your marketing teams, they are part of you. They are an audience that you need to kind of think about just as your sales team is. And so aligning kind of the way that you're packaging things and the way that you're producing things to be consumable by those teams can be really helpful.
I think everyone always has this question. Where does the boundary for product marketing stop and content marketing begin in companies where they are separate teams?
Yeah, that is, as you've seen, I've made a lot of mistakes in that area. I don't think there is one right answer for that. Again, there are types of content that I'm always going to want to write, right? I'm always going to want to write contributed articles, bylines, and I'm always going to want to hold on to sales enablement as well. That's just kind of a personal thing. But there's a lot of content that I think that is strategic and important for product marketing. So the more that you can kind of focus on what kind of content is aligned with our OKRs, our higher order OKRs, what do we need to produce to hit those? And then everything else, try to start to move into content marketing, right? So any kind of performance marketing, I would try to get off of my plate immediately as a product marketer. Maybe a place to start.
Same topic for content. How do you think generative AI is going to impact product marketing and the content piece in particular?
Yeah, this is actually in my potpourri of parting thoughts. Has anyone started using Jasper, ChatGPT? Has anyone been super impressed and thinks it's going to replace content writing altogether? Yeah, exactly. Here's the thing. Engineers will say your goal as an engineer is to automate yourself out of your job, right? Because then you become the automator and you don't lose your job by being automated out of it. So I'm kind of on this journey myself. I'm playing with Jasper. I'm playing with ChatGPT. We have kind of a culture of appreciating AI in our organization. Haven't been super impressed with it, but I'm not ready to just be a Luddite and say, forget it, I can write this better and faster. So I would say I'm still in this process, and I would encourage everyone here to kind of continue to start to play around with it. It's early days. I'm not a futurist. I don't know if it's going to replace us all eventually. But I think it's always good to kind of be aware of how those tools can be useful to help accelerate our work, right?
How are you able to align GTM or go-to-market strategy? I'm going to stop using acronyms and just spell it out, just in case. But since many times the chief revenue officer wants to drive GTM with no market research and data, so how do you drive that alignment?
How do you drive alignment with
for your GTM strategy with the CRO and the sales?
The CRO.
That was Sylvia. If I phrased that question awkwardly, feel free. I can pass the mic to you. But
yeah, I feel like that conversation around product marketing and sales alignment is a pretty big conversation and question. That's a good one. I would say is kind of look for the kind of quick ways to establish trust and to try to get alignment there. Usually I find working with sellers and really being encouraging and kind of even observing what messaging they're using in the field and then kind of trying to pull that back into what we're doing can be a really good way to show the field hey, we are paying attention to what works and we're bringing the best of that in to kind of help amplify our go-to-market strategy. But that feels like a kind of a whole other conversation. So Sylvia, let's talk about that later.
Okay, how involved are you in product strategy? So the pre-launch stuff, product naming, I'm assuming pricing, packaging goes into that and all other fun stuff, pre-product. Where are those responsibilities split between probably the product org and product marketing?
Oh, yeah, in terms of kind of getting ready for lunch. This was, this is another, this is my opinion here. I think product marketing should be in a position where you are steering as much roadmap and making decisions about the product strategy as possible. That is an important seat to have at the table as well. If your product management thinks that you are just the content team for their product, that also is no bueno. So again, bringing market research, bringing voice of customer, really doing your homework and bringing that into the conversation, I think is an important role that a lot of product marketing teams don't get asked to do enough and can really take initiative to kind of bring that back to the org and have a seat at the table.
Okay, and then at enterprises, how do you avoid reaching a point of content saturation where sales teams had so much content, they don't really know what to leverage, where, when, and what? Yeah.
Again, know your audience, right? How much content, can your sales team consume and what, what's going to work best for them? Again, at an enterprise, I'm hoping you have resources around sales training, enablement, probably dedicated teams there. Really collaborate and partner with those teams to understand what pieces are going to be most beneficial for your sales team and what are going to be most beneficial to kind of your goals, your go-to-market goals. But again, I don't think there's a right answer there. It kind of, but you should have resources there to support you in that.
I think that's like an ongoing struggle. Like we produce so much content and we're like, here sales, go read this. Do they read it? No. We're like, here, go into Seismic or insert chosen tool. Live share it to the customer so we have the detail and the insights. Are they doing it? No. They'll make their own presentation. So I feel like it's still a struggle. Sneak peek, that's a hot topic for the roundtable, so we can have more of a conversation there, and you can loop in Danielle and expand on that. So there still seems to be some desire from the room to better understand how do we actually measure the message. So if we're not evaluating the messaging brief or like key artifacts and deliverables that are standard for a product or a solution area, what does success look like? And how do we measure that?
Yep. Yeah, all right. How do we measure success of messaging if we're not measuring the success of individual pieces of our individual artifacts and performance, right? It is, I hope someone has a better answer for this, but I think of it similar to product market fit, where it's like, how do you know when you have product market fit? You just kind of feel it. Like you feel that momentum. You feel it to start to kind of work. You kind of get feedback. And I know that is a very like gut feeling, not data-driven way of saying that. But if you want more of kind of a measurement way of doing it. What we're doing now at Nudge Security is we're kind of looking at the composite of the messages. So we're looking at like aligning all of our messaging to different jobs to be done and different types of segments in the market. And then we have lots of pieces of content around that. So we've got kind of that cluster of ads, we've got clusters of webcasts and white papers. So I'm not ever looking at one individual piece of content to know whether that piece of content really worked. I really want to take that kind of like that composite whole, and then I want to kind of measure those different pieces or different messaging pillars against each other, kind of relative, to understand which ones are our best performing within the organization, right? So, that might be a good way to start. But again, that takes that collaboration with the engine. Product marketing teams, like you are still kind of beholden to all of those performance marketing tools in order to kind of get that data and feedback. I would just recommend trying to look at it a little bit more broadly and try to kind of create more of a just kind of a higher level of all of those pieces together rather than focusing on like how did my last blog post do, right?
It's like in each organization, the CMO is going to define or dictate what good is based on what his metrics are to the CEO or the board. So it's going to vary. I don't know if there's like a direct template, but again, we can chat about this later and see what's working across our different companies and experiences. So everyone say thank you to Danielle. Giant claps, yay.